Imagine being dragged into the town square, bound in chains, knowing your bones will be shattered one by one before an entire crowd. This was not just death. It was a spectacle, a lesson written in blood and broken bodies. Today, we uncover the terrifying history of the breaking wheel, the most brutal execution device of medieval Europe. The morning sun had barely risen when the sound of iron wheels being dragged over cobblestones filled the air. It was execution day, and the square in a small German town of the 16th century was already packed. Families, merchants, children, even wandering peasants had gathered to witness something both terrifying and spectacular. The breaking wheel. The wheel itself stood taller than a man, built of solid wood with iron fittings, like a cartwheel stripped from its wagon. For ordinary villagers, it was a tool of farming or transport, but here, in the hands of the executioner, it became a machine of bludgeoning and humiliation. The condemned that day was a thief, accused not only of stealing but also of murder, a crime that called for a punishment beyond the gallows. He had spent the night in chains, forced to listen as townsfolk hammered nails into the scaffold, and prepared the wheel for its gruesome purpose. Execution days were not just about punishment. They were theater. Food sellers lined the streets, selling bread, roasted meat, and cheap ale. Children clutched their mothers' skirts, torn between fear and curiosity. Priests moved among the crowd, whispering prayers, while gamblers made bets on how long the condemned would survive once the blows began. The condemned man, gaunt and pale, was dragged into the square. He had no dignity left. His clothes were ragged, his hair matted with sweat. Yet in his eyes burned a strange mix of terror and defiance. He knew what awaited him. The wheel was no quick death. It was designed to prolong agony, to crush bones slowly, turning the human body into a spectacle of suffering. The people believed this was justice, that crimes of blood demanded punishments of blood. The executioner, dressed in black with arms, like tree trunks, took his place beside the wheel. He carried a heavy iron cudgel, its head slightly curved to strike bones cleanly without ending life too quickly. He raised his hand to silence the crowd, and a hush fell over the square. The condemned was tied down, arms and legs spread across wooden planks. The executioner lifted the cudgel. The first strike aimed not at the head or chest, but the shin, because the breaking began from the outside in. The wheel was not just an instrument of death. It was a message, carved into flesh and bone. Crime would not be tolerated, and anyone who defied the law would be made into an example. The crowd braced as the iron swung downward. The first crack echoed like a gunshot. The condemned man screamed as his legs snapped at the shin, bending unnaturally. Mothers covered their children's eyes, but most of the crowd leaned closer, their faces tight with fascination. The executioner raised the cudgel again, striking the other leg, then the arms. With each blow, bones splintered, and the man's cries turned hoarse. This was the ritual. Break the limbs so the body could be woven into the wheel. Once the arms and legs were shattered, the condemned was lifted by assistants, his body limp, flopping like a rag doll, and laid across the wheel. The executioner began the weaving, bending broken limbs through the spokes, twisting them until they resembled a grotesque star. His head hung limp, his chest rising and falling shallowly, but he was alive. That was part of the cruelty. Death by wheel was not instantaneous. It was slow, dragging on for hours, even days if mercy was not granted. In some regions, executioners were ordered to deliver a coup de grâce, a final blow to the chest or neck to end the suffering. But often, the condemned was left exposed, strapped to the wheel and displayed like a warning sign. Birds circled overhead, waiting for the moment when flesh became food. Travelers passing through the town would see the broken body nailed high on a post, a gruesome deterrent against crime. The ritual was steeped in symbolism. Wheels represented the turning of fate. The cycle of life and punishment. By breaking the criminal upon a wheel, society showed that order had triumphed over chaos. It was not only punishment but performance, reminding the people that the law had teeth sharper than any thief's dagger. And yet, beneath the horror, some whispered doubts. Was such cruelty truly justice, or had punishment become entertainment? As the condemned groaned upon the wheel, the crowd's emotions shifted like tides. Some cheered, calling out for more. Others crossed themselves, muttering prayers for mercy. Children too young to understand stared wide-eyed as their elders explained, "This is what happens when you take what isn't yours." The breaking wheel turned public squares into theaters of fear. Rulers understood its power. They used it not only for punishment, but for propaganda. Executions were scheduled on market days, ensuring the maximum number of witnesses. Town criers announced crimes in advance, and preachers framed the punishment as God's will. For the authorities, the wheel was effective. The longer a body remained, displayed, the stronger the message. Criminals were not only killed, they were erased, humiliated, stripped of humanity. Their broken forms became scarecrows of flesh, warning all who passed. In some cases, bodies remained until nothing but bone and rusted iron were left. But there was always a darker side. Crowds sometimes jeered, throwing rotten vegetables, spitting at the dying man. Others wept, moved by pity despite themselves. Executioners became both feared and hated, necessary servants of justice, yet tainted by the blood they spilled. The condemned themselves often prayed aloud, confessing sins, begging for forgiveness, as the life drained from their shattered bodies. The breaking wheel revealed the contradictions of human nature. People recoiled at cruelty, yet could not look away. Justice demanded suffering, yet compassion whispered against it. And so the wheel turned, both literally and metaphorically, grinding flesh and bone into lessons written in horror. The breaking wheel was not confined to one country. From France to Germany, from the Netherlands to Scandinavia, it spread across Europe like a shadow. Each region had its own variations, but the essence remained the same: bludgeoning, breaking, and display. In France, the condemned might be struck with an iron bar called a mace, each blow carefully measured to prolong agony. In Germany, the punishment was codified in law, with executioners trained to break bones in a specific order. In Eastern Europe, entire roadsides were lined with wheels, bodies left to rot as grim milestones. The wheel was used for crimes deemed especially vile: murder, treason, arson. Women, too, were not spared, though often their punishment ended with strangulation before the breaking began. Sometimes mercy was shown. The executioner might deliver the final blow early, sparing hours of torment. But this mercy was unpredictable, dependent on the mood of the crowd, the orders of the judge, or the skill of the executioner. Legends grew around the wheel. In Christian tradition, Saint Catherine of Alexandria was sentenced to die upon one, but the wheel shattered at her touch, leading to her martyrdom. Since then, the device became known as the Catherine wheel, both feared and strangely sanctified. It became a symbol of divine intervention against human cruelty, though the actual practice continued for centuries. By the 18th century, Enlightenment thinkers began to criticize such punishments. Philosophers argued that true justice required reform, not torture. Slowly, the wheel fell out of use, replaced by faster executions, hanging, shooting, guillotine. But its memory lingered, a haunting reminder of a time when justice demanded suffering painted in public. When we look back at the breaking wheel today, it seems almost unimaginable. A device that shattered bodies, left men and women exposed to the elements, and turned punishment into theater feels barbaric, far removed from modern justice. Yet, it reveals much about human history. The wheel was not just an instrument of pain. It was a mirror of society's fears and beliefs. In an age when law and order were fragile, Rulers needed spectacles to prove their power. Violence was not hidden behind prison walls. It was paraded before the people. Justice was not swift and quiet. It was loud, messy, and unforgettable. The breaking wheel also forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. People watched. Crowds came willingly, even eagerly. They believed suffering could purify, that the criminal's torment brought balance to the world. But beneath that belief lay a hunger for spectacle, for the raw drama of life and death played out before their eyes. Today, the wheel is gone, but the questions remain. How far should justice go? When does punishment become cruelty? And why are humans so drawn to watch the suffering of others? In museums across Europe, fragments of old wheels still exist. Wooden spokes, iron rims, even paintings of executions. They stand as silent witnesses to a past where law was written in broken bones. The condemned thief of that morning centuries ago was long forgotten, his body reduced to dust. But the wheel that crushed him remains etched in memory, a symbol of justice twisted into horror. And perhaps in remembering, we are reminded of how fragile the line is between justice and cruelty, and how easily society can step across it. The breaking wheel has long vanished from our streets, but its shadow still lingers. It reminds us how far people once went in the name of justice, turning punishment into a public theater of fear. Today, we no longer see men and women twisted upon wheels in the town square, yet the questions it left behind remain. Where does justice end and cruelty begin? And why does humanity, time and again, find itself drawn to the suffering of others? The wheel may be silent now, rusting in history's memory, but its lesson is clear. When justice loses compassion, it becomes another kind of violence.